He dragged her out of the mansion by her arm, throwing her onto the wet asphalt while thunder cracked overhead. She was 8 months pregnant, penniless, and begging for mercy. Marcus Thorne, the city's most arrogant billionaire, laughed as he tossed her wedding ring into the mud, wrapping his arm around his mistress. He thought he had won. He thought Taylor was garbage. But he made a fatal mistake. He didn't know that the rain-soaked woman he just discarded was about to be picked up by the one man Marcus feared most in the world. 3 days later, the boardroom doors opened, and Marcus stopped breathing. Because the new owner of his company wasn't just a stranger, it was his wife. The grandfather clock in the foyer of the Thorne estate chimed midnight, but the sound was drowned out by the ferocious storm battering the windows. Inside, the atmosphere was even colder than the freezing rain outside. Taylor Thorne stood near the marble staircase, her hand instinctively cradling her swollen stomach. At 8 months pregnant, her petite frame was heavy, her ankles swollen, and her back aching. But none of that compared to the sharp pain in her chest as she looked at her husband, Marcus Thorne. Marcus was a man carved from ice and greed. As the CEO of Thorne Enterprises, he was used to discarding things that no longer served a purpose. Tonight, that thing was Taylor. "You have 10 minutes, Marcus said, his voice devoid of emotion. He took a sip of his scotch, not even looking at her. "Pack your essentials. Leave the jewelry I bought you. Leave the cards. Just get out." Taylor's lips trembled. "Marcus, please. The doctor said the baby is coming soon. My blood pressure is high. You can't throw us out in a storm." A sharp, mocking laugh echoed from the living room sofa. Jessica Vane, a supermodel with legs for days and a heart made of coal, uncrossed her legs and smirked. She was wearing a silk robe. Taylor's silk robe. "Oh, honey," Jessica purred, walking over to drape herself over Marcus's shoulder. "He isn't throwing us out. He's throwing you out. Marcus and I need the nursery for our future, not for some mistake you're carrying." Taylor felt the blood drain from her face. "Mistake? This is his son." Marcus finally turned to look at her. His eyes were dark, filled with a mixture of annoyance and disgust. He walked over, towering over her. "Is it? You were a dull charity case when I married you, Taylor. I needed a respectable wife to secure the board's vote 3 years ago. I have the vote now. I don't need the anchor." He pulled a document from his jacket pocket and slapped it against her chest. "Divorce papers. Signed. I've frozen the joint accounts. You get nothing. That's what happens when you violate the prenup." "I never violated anything," Taylor cried, clutching the papers. "Infidelity," Marcus lied smoothly. "Jessica saw you with the gardener." "That's a lie," Taylor screamed, her voice cracking. "She's lying to you." Marcus didn't argue. He simply grabbed Taylor's arm. His grip was bruising. He didn't drag her to the bedroom to pack. He dragged her to the front door. "Marcus, stop! You're hurting me!" He wrenched the heavy oak door open. The wind howled, spraying freezing rain into the warm foyer. With a shove that was shocking in its violence, he pushed his pregnant wife out onto the stone steps. Taylor stumbled, her knees hitting the wet pavement hard. A jagged bolt of lightning lit up the sky, illuminating her tear-streaked face. "Marcus!" she wailed, trying to stand up, slipping on the slick stone. "Please, where will I go?" Marcus stood in the doorway, the warm, golden light framing his silhouette. Jessica appeared beside him, holding a glass of wine, smiling as she watched Taylor struggle. "Figure it out, Ellie," Marcus sneered. "Go back to the gutter I found you in." He slammed the door. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Then came the sound of the heavy deadbolt sliding into place. Taylor sat in the freezing rain, the water soaking through her thin maternity dress instantly. She gasped for air, panic seizing her throat. She had no phone, No money, no coat, and a baby kicking furiously against her ribs, as if sensing his mother's terror. She dragged herself to the gate, shivering so violently her teeth chattered. She walked aimlessly down the long, winding driveway of the exclusive Hamptons estate, the darkness swallowing her whole. She walked for what felt like hours. Her vision began to blur. The cold was seeping into her bones, slowing her heart. I'm going to die here, she thought. My baby is going to die here. Her legs gave out on the side of the desolate highway. She collapsed into the wet grass, curling into a ball to protect her stomach. The world began to fade to black. The last thing she saw was a pair of blinding headlights cutting through the rain, coming straight toward her, and the screech of tires on wet asphalt. The sleek black Maybach skidded to a halt inches from Taylor's unconscious body. The driver, a burly man named Frank, jumped out with an umbrella, but the rear door opened before he could reach the handle. A man stepped out. He was tall, dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit that cost more than most people's houses. He didn't run. He moved with a predatory grace, ignoring the rain ruining his Italian leather shoes. Julian Sterling. If Marcus Thorne was a shark in the business world, Julian Sterling was the leviathan that ate sharks. He was the CEO of Sterling Global, a conglomerate that owned half of New York. He was known as the Ice King, because no one had ever seen him smile, and no one had ever seen him show mercy. Julian looked down at the woman in the mud. He saw the bruising on her arm, the soaked dress, and the undeniable curve of her pregnancy. Is she dead? Frank asked, rushing over. Julian crouched down, checking her pulse. His fingers were warm against her freezing skin. No, but she's hypothermic. Help me get her into the car. Careful with her stomach. Julian, a man who never touched anyone, a man who famously hated physical contact, scooped Taylor up into his arms. She was dangerously light, despite the pregnancy. Inside the warm, leather-scented interior of the Maybach, Julian stripped off his suit jacket and wrapped it around her. Hospital? Frank asked, looking in the rearview mirror. Julian looked at the woman's face. It was pale, blue-lipped, but hauntingly beautiful. He recognized her. Not personally, but he knew the face. This was Taylor Thorne, the wife of Marcus Thorne, the man Julian was currently in the process of hostilely acquiring. A dark, calculating look crossed Julian's eyes. This wasn't just a rescue, this was leverage. But as Taylor whimpered in her sleep, clutching his shirt, something shifted in Julian's chest, a protective instinct he hadn't felt in decades. No, Julian said, his voice deep and resonant. Take us to the penthouse. Call Dr. Aris, tell him to meet us there immediately, and get a private investigation team on Marcus Thorne. I want to know why his wife is dying on the side of the road at 1 a.m. 2 days later, Taylor woke up. She wasn't on the wet pavement. She was lying in a bed that felt like a cloud, covered in silk sheets that smelled of sandalwood and rain. The room was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline. She sat up, gasping, her hands flying to her stomach. "He's fine," a voice came from the corner of the room. Taylor froze. Sitting in a leather wingback chair was a man reading a financial newspaper. He lowered the paper, revealing piercing grey eyes and a jawline sharp enough to cut glass. Who are you?" Taylor whispered. "Julian Sterling," he replied, standing up. He walked over to the bed, pouring a glass of water from a crystal carafe. "Drink?" Taylor took the glass with trembling hands. She knew the name. Everyone knew the name. Julian Sterling was the most powerful man on the East Coast. "Why am I here?" she asked. "Because my driver almost ran over you," Julian said flatly. "And because your husband left you to die." Taylor flinched at the mention of Marcus. The memories came flooding back. The humiliation, the cold, the laughter of the mistress. She put the water down and covered her face, sobbing quietly. Julian didn't comfort her with empty words. He waited. When her sobbing subsided, he handed her a tablet. "Watch," he said. Taylor looked at the screen. It was a live news broadcast. Marcus Thorne was standing at a podium, Jessica Vane by his side. "It is with a heavy heart that I announce my wife, Taylor, has chosen to leave our home due to her personal struggles with mental health," Marcus told the cameras, looking devastatingly sad. "She has disappeared and we are worried. We ask for privacy." "He's lying!" Taylor screamed at the screen. "He threw me out." "I know," Julian said. He took the tablet back. "He's controlling the narrative. He's painting you as unstable so that when you try to claim alimony or child support, no judge will believe you. He plans to declare you unfit and take the child once it's born." Taylor went cold. "He wants my baby?" "He wants the heir," Julian corrected. "He doesn't care about the baby. He needs a legacy." Taylor looked up at Julian, desperation in her eyes. "Mr. Sterling, please, I have nothing. I can't fight him. He's a billionaire." Julian leaned in, placing his hands on the bed rails, boxing her in. His eyes locked onto hers. "He is a billionaire, yes. But I am the one who signs his paychecks. He just doesn't know it yet. My company secretly bought the majority shares of Thorne Enterprises this morning." Taylor's eyes widened. "I have a proposition for you, Taylor," Julian said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. "I need a wife. My board of directors is pressuring me to settle down, to improve my public image before I launch my political campaign. You need protection, and you need revenge." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. It wasn't just a diamond. It was a rare, blue diamond worth more than the entire Thorne estate. "Marry me," Julian said. "Not for love, for power. Marry me, and tomorrow we will walk into Thorne Enterprises. You won't just be his ex-wife. You will be the wife of the chairman. You will be his boss." Taylor stared at the ring. She thought of Marcus's cruel laugh. She thought of Jessica wearing her robe. She thought of her unborn son who almost died in the cold. The soft, timid Taylor died on that roadside. She reached out and took the ring. "When do we start?" Julian smirked, a rare, terrifying expression. "Right now. Get dressed, Mrs. Sterling. We have a board meeting to crash." The next morning, the penthouse was a hive of activity. Julian hadn't been joking. If Taylor was going to be Mrs. Sterling, she had to look untouchable. A team of stylists, makeup artists, and tailors, flown in from Paris and Milan overnight, swarmed the living room. Racks of designer maternity wear filled the space. Taylor stood in front of a floor-to-length mirror, looking at her reflection. She looked tired. Her eyes were puffy, her skin pale. She felt small. "Fix it," Julian's voice cut through the room. He was leaning against the doorframe, sipping espresso, watching the team with hawk-like intensity. "She doesn't look like a victim. She looks like a queen. Make it happen." The head stylist, a flamboyant man named Paolo, nodded vigorously. "Of course, Mr. Sterling. We will bring out the fire." For the next 4 hours, Taylor was scrubbed, polished, and painted. They cut her mousy, limp hair into a sharp, sophisticated bob that framed her jawline. They applied makeup that highlighted her cheekbones and hid the sorrow in her eyes. When it came time to dress, Paolo held up a dress that made Taylor gasp. It wasn't the beige or grey, shapeless sacks Marcus used to make her wear. It was a deep, blood-red maternity dress made of structured silk. It was elegant, powerful, and screamed money. "Put it on," Julian commanded softly. When Taylor emerged, the room went silent. The red dress hugged her bump proudly, turning what Marcus called a burden into a symbol of life and strength. She wore towering heels, which she hesitated on, but Julian insisted she needed the height to look Marcus in the eye. Julian walked over to her. He didn't smile, but his eyes softened. He reached into a velvet box and pulled out a necklace, a string of diamonds so heavy it felt cold against her throat. "This belonged to my grandmother," Julian said, clasping it around her neck. "She was the toughest woman I ever knew. Now it protects you." Taylor touched the diamonds, her hands trembling. "Julian, why are you doing this? Really? It can't just be for the board." Julian paused, his hand lingering near her shoulder. "I despise bullies, Taylor, and I see potential in you. Marcus tried to bury you. He didn't realize you were a seed." He offered her his arm. "The car is waiting. We have a wedding to attend first. Then we go to war." They were married in a private, civil ceremony at City Hall. No guests, just Frank, the driver, as a witness. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Taylor felt a strange surge of electricity. She was no longer Taylor Thorne, the discarded wife. She was Taylor Sterling. As they got back into the car, Julian handed her a file. "Read this. It's the agenda for today's emergency board meeting at Thorne Enterprises. Marcus is planning to announce a merger with a shell company owned by Jessica Vane. He's trying to funnel the company's assets into her name before the divorce settlement." Taylor's eyes flashed with anger. "He's stealing the company. My father helped him build that company." "Exactly," Julian said, checking his watch. "We arrive in 20 minutes. When we walk through those doors, you don't look down. You don't stutter. You are the owner of 51% of that company via my acquisition. You own him." Taylor took a deep breath, placing a hand on her stomach. "For you," she thought. "Mommy is going to fight for you." The conference room at Thorne Enterprises was thick with tension. The 20 board members sat around the long mahogany table, whispering nervously. Marcus Thorne sat at the head of the table, looking triumphant. He wore a smug grin, tapping his expensive pen against the glass of water. Jessica Vane sat to his right, officially listed as a creative consultant, but everyone knew she was just there to gloat. "Gentlemen, ladies," Marcus began, standing up. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. Today marks a new era for Thorne Enterprises. As you know, I have been dealing with difficult personal matters. My unstable ex-wife has abandoned her duties." A murmur went through the room. "However," Marcus continued, his voice rising, "we must move forward. I am proposing a strategic partnership with Vane Global. This will secure our assets and bankrupt the shareholders while lining your pockets." A deep, baritone voice boomed from the entrance. The heavy double doors swung open with a bang. Every head turned. Marcus froze, his pen hovering in midair. Walking into the room was Julian Sterling. The atmosphere instantly shifted. The air seemed to be sucked out of the room. Julian Sterling didn't just walk, he marched, and he wasn't alone. Walking beside him, her arm looped through his, was a woman in a stunning blood-red dress. She looked radiant, fierce, and utterly terrifying. It took Marcus a full 10 seconds to recognize her. "Taylor," he choked out, his face losing all color. Jessica dropped her phone. What? What is she doing here? And why is she with him?" Taylor didn't say a word. She walked alongside Julian until they reached the head of the table. Julian pulled out the chair directly opposite Marcus, the chair reserved for the chairman of the board. He didn't sit. He gestured for Taylor to sit. She sat down gracefully, smoothing her dress over her stomach, staring dead at Marcus. "You can't be in here," Marcus shouted, recovering from his shock. "Security! Get this woman out of here. She's trespassing." "Sit down, Marcus," Julian said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a sledgehammer. "If anyone is trespassing, it's you." "Excuse me." Marcus laughed nervously. "This is my company. You're Julian Sterling. I know who you are, but you have no business here." Julian signaled to his assistant, who was handing out folders to every board member. "Actually," Taylor spoke up. Her voice was steady, clear, and colder than ice. "He does. As of this morning, Sterling Global acquired all outstanding debt and 51% of the voting shares of Thorn Enterprises." The boardroom erupted in chaos. The board members were flipping through the papers, gasping. This is legit," one member stammered. "Sterling owns the majority." Marcus looked like he was going to vomit. "That's impossible. I have the controlling interest." "You had," Taylor corrected, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips. "Until you leveraged your shares to buy that yacht for Jessica last month. You defaulted on the loan terms. The bank sold the debt. Julian bought it." Taylor leaned forward, locking eyes with the man who had thrown her into the rain 3 days ago. "So technically, Marcus, I'm your boss." "You?" Marcus spat, pointing a shaking finger at her. "You're nothing. You're a pathetic, pregnant charity case. Julian, look at her. She's carrying my bastard child." The room went deadly silent. Julian slowly turned his head toward Marcus. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Correction," Julian said, his voice dropping to a whisper that terrified everyone present. "She is carrying my heir." Gasps rang out. Jessica's jaw hit the floor. Taylor looked at Julian, surprised, but he squeezed her hand under the table. "And," Julian continued, "she is not a charity case. She is Mrs. Taylor Sterling. My wife." "Wife?" Jessica shrieked, standing up. "You married her. She's a whale. She's ugly. She—" "Another word," Julian cut in, staring at Jessica with eyes like dead sharks. "And I will ensure you never work in this city again. In fact, looking at these financials, it seems you've been using company funds for personal vacations." Julian turned to the security guards who had just arrived. "Security," Julian commanded. "Escort Mr. Thorne and Ms. Vane out of the building. They are suspended, pending an embezzlement investigation." "You can't do this to me!" Marcus screamed as 2 guards grabbed his arms. "I built this company. Taylor! Taylor, stop them! I'm the father of your child." Taylor stood up slowly. She walked over to where Marcus was being held. She looked down at him, her hand resting on her belly. "You lost the right to be a father when you threw us out in the storm," she whispered, loud enough for only him to hear. "Enjoy the gutter, Marcus. I hear it's cold this time of year." "Get him out of my sight," Taylor commanded the guards. As Marcus and Jessica were dragged out, kicking and screaming, the boardroom fell silent. Taylor turned to the stunned board members. "Now," she said, her voice commanding the room, "shall we discuss the actual future of this company?" For the first time in her life, Taylor felt powerful, but she didn't see the dark look in Marcus's eyes as he was dragged away. This wasn't over. Marcus Thorne was a desperate man, and desperate men did dangerous things. 3 weeks had passed since the boardroom coup, and the media storm was relentless. The headlines had shifted from "Billionaire divorces pregnant wife" to "The Pregnant Phoenix," how Taylor Sterling rose from the ashes. Taylor sat in the corner office that used to belong to Marcus. It looked different now. The dark, oppressive mahogany furniture had been replaced with modern glass and warm cream tones. Fresh flowers, white lilies, her favorite, arrived every morning, a silent delivery from Julian's office across town. She placed a hand on her stomach. The baby was due any day now. Her ankles were swollen, her back throbbed, and the stress of cleaning up Marcus's financial mess was immense. He had left Thorn Enterprises in shambles, riddled with illegal debts and shell companies. "You should be resting," a voice came from the doorway. Taylor looked up to see Julian. He wasn't wearing his usual armor of a three-piece suit. Today, he wore a black turtleneck and dark trousers, looking less like a CEO and more like a tactical commander. He walked in, closing the door behind him. "I can't rest," Taylor sighed, rubbing her temples. Marcus signed a contract with a logistics hub in the chaotic industrial district. The safety reports are missing. If I don't inspect it today, the union strikes tomorrow. Julian frowned, walking over to her desk. He placed a warm hand on her shoulder, his thumb rubbing the tension knot in her neck. The touch sent a jolt of warmth through her. Their marriage was supposed to be a contract, revenge and protection, but in the quiet moments at the penthouse, eating late-night takeout or watching movies, the lines had blurred. Julian was fiercely protective, and Taylor found herself leaning on him more than she ever intended. "I'll go," Julian said. "You stay here." "No." Taylor stood up, albeit slowly. "They need to see me. They need to know the new owner isn't afraid to get her hands dirty. I need to prove I'm not just Marcus's ex-wife." Julian studied her face for a moment, seeing the steel in her eyes. He nodded once. "Fine, but I'm coming with you." And Frank drives. The logistics hub was a cavernous warehouse on the outskirts of the city, filled with the screech of metal on metal and the smell of diesel. It was a place of hard hats and heavy machinery. The foreman, a sweaty man named Miller, met them at the entrance. He wouldn't look Taylor in the eye. He kept wiping his hands on his grease-stained overalls. Mrs. Sterling," Miller stammered. "We wasn't expecting you. The machines are running hot today." "That's why I'm here, Mr. Miller," Taylor said, her voice projecting over the noise. She wore a white hard hat and a high-visibility vest over her maternity dress. "I want to see the conveyor belt system Marcus installed last month." Miller's eyes darted to the catwalks above them. It's not safe up there, ma'am. Maybe we do this in the office." "I'll be fine," Taylor said, stepping onto the warehouse floor. Julian stayed glued to her side, his eyes scanning the shadows. He didn't like this. His instincts, honed by years of corporate warfare, were screaming. As they walked down the central aisle, surrounded by towering stacks of shipping crates, Taylor noticed the workers were unusually quiet. They weren't working. They were watching. "Mr. Miller," Julian said, his voice cutting through the air, "why is the safety override on the overhead crane disabled?" Miller froze. I don't know what you mean." "The light is red," Julian pointed up. "That crane is holding 5 tons of steel and the safety lock is off." Suddenly, a metallic clang echoed from the catwalks high above. Taylor looked up just in time to see a shadow move, a figure in a dark hoodie sprinting away. Then, a terrible groaning sound filled the air. The massive cable holding the suspended steel crate snapped. "Taylor!" Julian didn't think. He didn't hesitate. He lunged at her. He wrapped his arms around her body, shielding her stomach with his own torso, and threw them both to the side, behind a stack of concrete barriers. Crash. The sound was deafening. The ground shook as if a bomb had gone off. Dust and debris exploded outward, filling the air with a choking grey cloud. The crate had landed exactly where Taylor had been standing a second ago. If Julian hadn't moved, she would have been flattened. Silence followed, broken only by the settling dust and Taylor's coughing. "Taylor!" "Ellie!" Julian's voice was ragged. He was hovering over her, his body forming a protective cage. "Are you hurt?" "The baby?" Taylor was shaking, her eyes wide with terror. She clutched his arms. I'm okay. I think I'm okay." Julian looked up, his face transforming into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. Blood trickled down his temple where a piece of debris had struck him, but he didn't feel it. He stood up, helping Taylor gently to her feet, then turned to Miller. The foreman was cowering near a forklift, looking at the destroyed crate with horror. Julian walked over to him. He moved so fast Miller didn't have time to run. Julian grabbed the man by the collar of his overalls and slammed him against the forklift. "Who?" Julian roared, his voice echoing through the silent warehouse. "Who paid you?" I didn't know," Miller blubbered, tears streaming down his face mixed with grease. "He said it would just scare her. He said no one would get hurt." "Who?" Julian tightened his grip, lifting the man off his feet. "Thorne," Miller screamed. "It was Marcus Thorne. He met me last night. He gave me 50 grand to cut the cable. He said if she was dead, he'd get the company back." Taylor gasped, her hands covering her mouth. Marcus hadn't just tried to sabotage her reputation. He had tried to kill her. He had tried to kill his own unborn child just to get his money back. Julian dropped Miller like a sack of garbage. He turned to his head of security, who was running toward them with guns drawn. "Arrest him," Julian commanded, pointing at Miller, "and lock down the city. I want Marcus Thorne found. If he tries to leave New York, burn him down." Julian turned back to Taylor. The rage in his eyes vanished, replaced by a desperate fear. He scooped her up into his arms, ignoring her protests. "We're going to the hospital," he stated. "Right now." "Julian, I'm fine. You almost died, Taylor." His voice cracked, a sound so raw it silenced her. He looked at her, his grey eyes shimmering with emotion. "I almost lost you. Do you understand? I don't care about the company. I don't care about the war. I cannot lose you." Taylor rested her head against his chest, listening to the frantic beating of his heart. In that dust-filled warehouse, amidst the wreckage of an assassination attempt, she realized something. She wasn't just his business partner, and he wasn't just her savior. They were falling in love. The attempt on Taylor's life changed everything. Julian went into total lockdown mode. The penthouse became a fortress. He hired ex-Mossad agents to stand guard at the elevator, the lobby, and even the fire escape. Marcus Thorne was officially a fugitive. The police had issued a warrant for attempted murder. But Marcus had vanished. His accounts were frozen, his assets seized. But a desperate man with connections to the criminal underworld could hide for a long time. 2 weeks passed. The due date was 3 days away. Taylor felt heavy, like a ticking time bomb. The doctor had ordered bed rest, but Taylor was restless. She paced the living room of the penthouse, looking out at the rain-slicked city. "You're pacing again," Julian said from the sofa. He was working on his laptop, but his eyes followed her every move. "I feel useless," Taylor complained. "I'm trapped in a glass cage." "You're safe," Julian corrected. "That's what matters." "I need fresh air, Julian. Real air, not recycled AC air." She turned to him with pleading eyes. "Can we just go for a drive, just around the block? I promise I won't get out of the car." Julian hesitated. He hated the idea of her leaving the penthouse, but he saw the toll the confinement was taking on her. She looked pale and depressed. "Fine," he relented, closing his laptop. "Frank will bring the armored SUV. We do 1 loop around Central Park and we come back. 5 guards follow us." Taylor smiled, the first real smile in days. "Thank you." The drive started peacefully. The rain drummed rhythmically against the bulletproof glass of the SUV. Julian held Taylor's hand in the back seat, his thumb tracing the knuckles. "When the baby comes," Julian said softly, looking out the window, "I was thinking, we should name him after your father, Robert." Taylor squeezed his hand, tears pricking her eyes. "I'd like that. Robert Julian Sterling." Julian looked at her, surprised. "You want to give him my name?" "You saved him," Taylor whispered. "You're more of a father to him than Marcus ever was." The moment was perfect, peaceful. Then chaos erupted. As they turned a quiet corner near the park's west entrance, a heavy garbage truck smashed into the lead security car, crushing it instantly. "Ambush!" Frank yelled, slamming on the brakes. Before the SUV could reverse, a second truck slammed into them from behind, pinning the car. The impact threw Taylor forward, the seatbelt digging painfully into her stomach. She screamed. "Stay down!" Julian roared, unbuckling his seatbelt and throwing himself over her. The windows were bulletproof, but they weren't bomb-proof. A masked man ran up to the side of the car and slapped a device onto the window. Boom! The door was blown off its hinges. The concussion grenade disoriented everyone inside. Julian tried to reach for the gun in his ankle holster, but a taser prong hit him in the neck. He convulsed and slumped over Taylor, unconscious. "Get her! Leave him!" a frantic voice shouted. Rough hands grabbed Taylor. She kicked and screamed, fighting with the ferocity of a mother protecting her young. "Julian! Julian!" she screamed, reaching for his unconscious body. "Shut her up!" A cloth soaked in chloroform was pressed over her face. She held her breath, trying to fight it, but the darkness clawed at the edges of her vision. The last thing she saw was Julian lying on the floor of the car, bleeding from the head as the rain poured in. Taylor woke up to the smell of rust and rotting fish. She was tied to a wooden chair. Her hands were bound behind her back, and her ankles were taped to the chair legs. Pain radiated through her lower back, sharp, rhythmic, cramping pain. She groaned, lifting her head. She was in an old boat shed. Water lapped against the wood beneath the floorboards. "Finally," a voice sneered from the shadows. Marcus Thorne stepped into the light of a hanging bulb. He looked terrible. His expensive suit was torn and dirty. He hadn't shaved in weeks, and his eyes were wild, bloodshot and twitching. He held a revolver loosely in his hand. Behind him stood Jessica Vane, but she didn't look like the arrogant supermodel anymore. She was shivering, hugging herself, looking terrified of Marcus. "Marcus!" Taylor gasped. "Let me go, the baby. The baby!" Marcus laughed, a manic, high-pitched sound. "Always about the baby. That thing ruined my life. You ruined my life." He paced back and forth, waving the gun. "I had everything, Taylor. Money, respect, power. Then you and your new husband took it all away. Do you know what it's like to sleep in a dumpster? Do you?" "You did this to yourself," Taylor said, trying to keep her voice steady, though panic was rising in her throat. She felt another cramp, stronger this time, a contraction. "Oh God, not now. Please, not now." "Shut up!" Marcus struck her across the face with the back of his hand. Taylor tasted blood. "Marcus, stop!" Jessica cried out. "We're supposed to just ransom her. You said we wouldn't hurt her." "I lied," Marcus screamed at Jessica, pointing the gun at her. Jessica whimpered and shrank back. "There is no ransom, you idiot. Julian won't pay. He'll hunt us down. The only way out is to make him suffer. I'm going to kill her, and then I'm going to send him the body." "Marcus, please," Taylor panted, the pain in her stomach becoming unbearable. "I'm going into labor. The baby is coming." Marcus stared at her stomach. A cruel, twisted idea seemed to form in his mind. "Good," he whispered. "Let it come. Let Julian know his heir died in a filthy boat shed." He pulled out a burner phone and dialed a number. He put it on speaker. "Sterling," Marcus said when the line clicked. "Marcus." Julian's voice came through the phone. It was terrifyingly calm. It sounded like death itself. "If you touch one hair on her head, I will peel the skin from your bones." "Empty threats from a man who lost his wife," Marcus taunted. "I have her, Julian. And guess what? She's having the baby right now, in a dirty, cold shed. And you're helpless. What do you want?" "I want you to sign over everything," Marcus demanded. "The company, the assets, your personal fortune. Transfer it all to an offshore account in the Caymans. You have 1 hour. If the money isn't there, Taylor dies. If you call the cops, she dies. I need proof of life." Marcus shoved the phone against Taylor's face. "Julian!" Taylor screamed, unable to hold back a sob of pain as another contraction ripped through her. "Julian, it hurts. The baby is coming." "Ellie, listen to me." Julian's voice shifted, becoming urgent and soft. "I'm coming. Do you hear me? I am coming for you. Just breathe. Hold on." Marcus pulled the phone away and hung up. He smashed the phone under his heel. "He's not coming," Marcus spat. "He's probably calling his lawyers to see if you're worth the cost." Taylor bowed her head, breathing through the pain. She knew Julian better than that. He wasn't calling lawyers. He was hunting. But time was running out. The contractions were 3 minutes apart. "Jessica," Taylor whispered, looking at the other woman. Jessica was crying silently in the corner. "Jessica, please. You're a woman. Don't let him do this. My baby. He's innocent." Jessica looked at Taylor, then at the unhinged Marcus, who was muttering to himself and checking his gun. She saw the madness in his eyes. She realized that even if they got the money, Marcus was going to kill them all. He was too far gone. Jessica's eyes darted to a rusty fishing knife lying on a workbench near her. "Help me," Taylor mouthed. Suddenly, a loud noise came from outside, the sound of a helicopter rotor blade chopping the air. Marcus panicked. "He found us! How did he find us?" He ran to the window. "I told him no cops!" As Marcus looked out the window, Jessica made her move. She didn't grab the knife. She wasn't brave enough to fight Marcus. Instead, she ran for the door, unbolted it, and fled into the night, leaving the door wide open. "You bitch!" Marcus turned and fired a shot at the fleeing woman, missing her. He turned back to Taylor, his face twisted into a mask of pure hate. "Fine," he snarled, raising the gun to Taylor's head. "If I'm going down, I'm taking you with me." Taylor squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the bullet. Crash. The skylight above them shattered. A figure in black tactical gear rappelled down on a rope, swinging through the broken glass like a dark angel. It wasn't the police, it was Julian. He hit the ground and rolled. Marcus spun around, firing wildly. Bang! Bang! A bullet grazed Julian's shoulder, but he didn't even slow down. He closed the distance in a second. He didn't use a weapon. He used his fists. He slammed into Marcus with the force of a freight train. The gun skittered across the floor. Julian unleashed a lifetime of rage into Marcus's face. Left, right, a knee to the ribs. Bone crunched. Marcus collapsed, wheezing, blood pouring from his nose and mouth. Julian stood over him, breathing heavily, his knuckles bloody. He pulled his own gun from his holster and aimed it right between Marcus's eyes. "No!" Taylor screamed. "Julian! The baby! The baby is coming now!" Julian froze. He looked at Marcus, who was unconscious and broken, then at his wife, who was writhing in pain. He holstered his gun. Marcus wasn't worth the time. Taylor needed him. He rushed to her, cutting the ropes with a knife from his belt. "I've got you," he gasped, catching her as she slumped forward. I've got you, Ellie. Julian. She grabbed his shirt, her nails digging into his skin. I can't move. He's coming. The head. I can feel the head. Julian looked around. The shed was filthy. The helicopter was outside, but there was no time to get her to a hospital. Okay, Julian said, his voice trembling for the first time. He stripped off his tactical jacket and laid it on the cleanest part of the floor. He lifted her onto it. Okay, we do this here. You and me. I'm scared, Taylor sobbed. Julian took her hand, kissing her sweat-drenched forehead. Look at me. You are the strongest woman I know. You survived him. You survived the storm. You can do this. Push, Taylor. Push! As the police sirens wailed in the distance and the storm raged outside, a new sound filled the boat shed. A cry. A loud, healthy, piercing cry of a newborn baby. Julian lifted the tiny, slippery bundle into the air. He was crying, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the blood and grime. It's a boy, Julian whispered, his voice breaking with joy. Ellie, look, it's our son. He placed the baby on Taylor's chest. Taylor looked down at the tiny face, the dark hair, the scrunched-up eyes. He was perfect. They were safe. 1 year later. The morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains of the master suite in the Sterling penthouse, casting a warm, golden glow over the room. It was a stark contrast to the cold, rainy night that had started it all. Taylor stood by the crib in the nursery, watching her son, Robert Julian Sterling, sleep. At 12 months old, he was a perfect blend of his parents. He had Taylor's soft smile, but Julian's intense, calculating grey eyes. She wasn't the same woman who had been dragged out of the Thorne mansion. The fear that used to live in her posture was gone, replaced by a natural, fluid grace. She wore a tailored cream business suit, her hair styled in a sharp, professional cut. She was the CEO of the newly rebranded Phoenix Holdings, formerly Thorne Enterprises. Under her leadership, the company's stock had tripled. She hadn't just saved the company, she had reinvented it. Strong arms wrapped around her waist from behind. She didn't flinch. She leaned back into the embrace. He's finally asleep, Julian whispered, kissing the side of her neck. He has your stubbornness. He has your energy, Taylor corrected, turning in his arms to face him. Julian Sterling, the Ice King of New York, looked different too. The hard lines of his face had softened. He smiled more in the last year than he had in the previous 40. He was still the most feared man in the boardroom, but at home he was simply a father and a husband. Are you ready for tonight? Julian asked, adjusting the lapel of her jacket. The charity gala. Taylor sighed. The press will be there. They still want to talk about the kidnapping, about Marcus. Julian's expression darkened slightly at the mention of the name. Let them talk. You are the woman who survived. You are the victor. Marcus is nothing more than a cautionary tale. The reality of Marcus's fate was far grimmer than a tale. 300 miles away, in the maximum security wing of Upstate Correctional Facility, inmate 8940 shuffled into the common room. Marcus Thorne looked 20 years older. His hair was thinning and grey, his once manicured hands rough and calloused from prison labour. He sat down at a metal table, staring at the small, mounted television in the corner. It was the only window he had to the world he used to rule. On the screen, a news channel was broadcasting live from the Met Gala red carpet. And here comes the power couple of the decade, the reporter gushed. Taylor and Julian Sterling. Taylor is wearing a custom gold gown, looking absolutely radiant. It's hard to believe that just a year ago, she was involved in one of the most high-profile kidnapping cases in state history. Marcus watched, his jaw tight. He saw Taylor. She looked magnificent. She looked untouchable. She was laughing at something Julian whispered in her ear. She was wearing the diamonds Marcus had once told her were too good for her. "Hey, old man." A younger inmate shoved Marcus's shoulder. "Move it. I want to watch the game." "That's my wife," Marcus muttered, pointing a shaking finger at the screen. "That was my company." The inmates laughed. "Yeah, right, Thorne. And I'm the Queen of England." "Move." Marcus was shoved off the bench. He fell to the cold concrete floor, scraping his elbow. As he looked up, he saw Jessica Vane on the screen, but not on the red carpet. The news segment had cut to a "Where are they now?" feature. Jessica had testified against Marcus to cut a plea deal. She avoided prison time, but was sentenced to 5 years of probation and community service. The footage showed her wearing an orange vest, picking up trash on the side of the Jersey Turnpike. She looked miserable, her beauty faded by bitterness and hard labor. Marcus closed his eyes. He had tried to destroy Taylor to save his ego. Instead, he had forged her into steel and locked himself in a cage. The realization was a heavier weight than any prison sentence. Back at the gala, the flashbulbs were blinding. Taylor stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of New York's elite. Julian stood just off stage, his eyes never leaving her. He was her shadow, her protector, her partner. "Mrs. Sterling," a reporter shouted from the front row, "you've been through hell and back. You were betrayed, destitute, and nearly killed. What is your message to women who feel like they have no hope?" The room went quiet. Taylor touched the microphone. She thought back to the rain, to the mud, to the moment the door slammed in her face. She thought about the boat shed and the moment Julian repelled through the skylight like a guardian angel. "My message," Taylor said, her voice clear and resonant, "is that rock bottom is a foundation. When I was thrown out into the storm, I thought my life was over. I thought my value was defined by the man who held the deed to my house." She looked over at Julian and smiled, a genuine love-filled smile. "But I learned that a storm doesn't just destroy, it clears the path. It reveals who is standing by your side when the sky falls. I didn't return to this life as a victim. I didn't return just as a wife. I returned as a CEO, as a mother, and as a survivor." She paused, her eyes hardening slightly as she looked into the camera lens, knowing somewhere Marcus might be watching. To anyone who thinks they can discard a human being like trash, remember this: the trash you throw out today might just buy the company you work for tomorrow. The crowd erupted in applause. It was a standing ovation. Later that night, back at the penthouse, the noise of the city was muffled by the thick glass. Taylor stood on the balcony, wrapped in Julian's tuxedo jacket, looking at the skyline. Julian joined her, handing her a glass of sparkling water. "You were incredible tonight," he said. "I was honest," she replied. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Julian." "Thank you. For stopping the car that night, for not driving past." Julian turned her around, cupping her face in his hands. The city lights reflected in his eyes. "I didn't save you, Taylor," he said fiercely. "I just gave you a ride. You saved yourself, and in doing so, you saved me. I was a ghost in this penthouse before you arrived. You and Robert, you made me alive." He kissed her, deep and slow, a promise of a lifetime of protection and partnership. The storm had passed, the rain had stopped, and Taylor Sterling, the woman who had been kicked out into the cold, was finally, truly home. And that is the incredible story of Taylor and Julian. From a rainy roadside rejection to the pinnacle of power, Taylor proved that the best revenge isn't just surviving, it's thriving. Marcus learned the hard way that when you treat people like they are nothing, you might just be creating the very enemy who will take everything from you. It's a reminder that no matter how dark the storm gets, there is always a way back up, especially if you have the courage to fight for your own worth. So what did you think? Did Marcus get the punishment he deserved in that prison cell, or should he have suffered more? And would you have forgiven Jessica for her role in the betrayal? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice, romance, and sweet revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. We have a crazy thriller coming up next week that you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you step on today. They might be your boss tomorrow. See you in the next video.